Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Hub Official, and also follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. After having programs with Darby Allin and Eddie Kingston, CM Punk now finds himself in a feud with MJF. Given their abilities on the mic, many have been waiting for this rivalry to unfold. At the C2E2 event, Punk talked about feuding with MJF and addressed those critical of his booking in AEW. Yeah, I think that's one matchup everybody wanted to see even before I even came back. I always heard, oh, I want to see CM Punk and MJF go back and forth. A lot of people think I'm off to a slow start in AEW, but to me, and just what Adam Cole just said, there are 5 years with this stuff with all of the integral characters and players. MJF is definitely somebody I wanted to share a ring with. I think now that we're getting to it, people can finally see the bigger picture. They can trust AEW as a whole for the direction where stuff goes. The fans, I understand, they want to know the behind the scenes stuff. They want to peel back the curtain. Everyone is an armchair booker. I am. Everyone is an armchair coach, quarterback, whatever. It's human nature for you to watch sports and say, why did you just put this guy in? Why is he on the bench? You know, blah blah. It's no different, I think, with pro wrestling with the fans. During that same event, Punk also touched on working in AEW, saying one of the best things about the company is that they enjoy making fans happy. To me, one of the best things about AEW is we enjoy the payoffs. We like making the fans happy instead of just for some reason making them miserable and doing stuff just to piss them off. Sometimes the happiest outcome is the most obvious one. We don't really feel the need to beat anyone over the head with switching it just because they figured it out first. I enjoy making the fans happy. That's one of the biggest, that's like the juice for being a pro wrestler, is getting reactions out of the crowd. When it comes to him and me, you ain't seen nothing yet. Hook, the son of AEW commentator and former ECW champion Taz, recently made his in-ring debut for the company. His debut was impressive to many, as Hook would end up trending on social media. Now on Busted Open Radio, Mark Henry gave his thoughts on that debut. There's some people, guys, I hate to be a pessimist because normally, you know, I'm an optimist. You know, I like the positive side, but everybody's not gonna make it. Everybody that you see that comes on, they're not gonna stick. It's just the nature of the business. From that first opening impression, I think Hook's gonna stick, man. I think that he's a guy that can evolve, and that's the thing in pro wrestling. If you don't evolve, if you don't change with the times, you're not gonna be around very long. I can see him in the next 3 years as AEW grows being one of AEW's future stars. Like, I mean a legit bona fide star. With Jeff Hardy being recently released from WWE, his brother Matt has already hinted at the two possibly reuniting in AEW. While it would be great to see Jeff back in action, many want him to get healthy before continuing his in-ring career. This sentiment was shared by Jim Cornette. As he noted on his podcast, everyone is thinking, oh, now we are getting the Hardy Boys reunion. I know everyone really wants that to happen, and I'm not saying it would be a bad thing, but right now it would be ridiculous. Tony Khan has to realize that short term, it would be a huge pop. But if you do not rectify the problem he just had before, is he going to have it in another place? It would be a lower pressure environment. Sometimes lower pressure environments bring out bad habits. Or it would be a lower pressure he would be in, and these kinds of things will not happen. But the point is, you have to think twice because you were just taking a chance. Former NXT North American champion Bronson Reed was let go by WWE in August, despite many thinking he would end up on the main roster. Now, as Jonah Rock, he has made his debut for New Japan and is set to be a part of the Battle of Los Angeles tournament for PWG in January. In the meantime, he talked to Instinct Culture about being angry after his release from WWE. I didn't have any emotion of sadness or being upset, which a lot of people do when they get released. That's the instinct that you go to, and of course you should. But I've been through so many ups and downs in my professional wrestling career, where I've had things like this happen before where I was told no, and that was it. But this time around, I was angrier, because I'd worked so hard through NXT and believed in the black and gold brand. After announcing a temporary hiatus, Ring of Honor would release all their wrestling talent. Former ROH champion Jay Lethal is now a part of AEW, as he recalled the company letting talent know they were closing up shop, saying this on Talk is Jericho. We're in a Zoom call, and they dropped this bomb on us. A whole roster Zoom call, 50 people. One telltale sign that something bad was happening was normally these Zoom calls just involved the people who were about to do our TV tapings. This Zoom call had literally everybody, even the people who were overseas that couldn't make the show. I was like, oh boy. Literally, while the Zoom call meeting is going on in the middle of this big announcement, I'm thinking, oh man, what's the next step for me? Completely out of the blue. Not to give too much. I'm not sure who I will piss off by saying too much of this, but we had gotten an email announcing that we were going to have the Zoom meeting, and the email sounded promising. Like, hey, we've got a taping that's coming up, we're going to discuss 2022, the early parts of it. So all of us, we were like, alright, this is exactly what we wanted to hear. Going into the meeting, I would definitely say and I can't speak for everybody, but I was caught off guard. Years back, Xia Li became the first Chinese talent to join WWE. After working on NXT, vignettes began to air on the main roster. Now she's made her SmackDown debut, where she saved Naomi from Shayna Baszler and Sonya Deville. Speaking to Daily DDT, Li talked about her debut. They asked about my background and about my family, so I told them my story. That vignette is a real story about my life. I'm really happy they put my real story on TV. There's a lot of feeling there. When they aired it, I cried. If I have that feeling, they will have that same feeling. Also, I had a dream, like a superhero dream, when I was a child. So this is kind of my dream come true. I'm very happy that they have this whole package for me, and they did an amazing job. I'm surprised they did this whole package for me. I didn't know. I found out at the same time as you. When it came up, I'm sending in the back like, oh my god, so good. They did an amazing job. I really appreciate that. Lee would reveal to Screen Rant that the vignettes have a real link to the story of her character. As she mentioned, when she showed them to her sister, she began to cry. I remember I showed my sister the vignettes. She was crying just like me, and she knew where all of these story came from. She had the same feeling as me, so she told me she's very proud of me. They call me many times. They worry about me. They know I'm here lonely. They are very proud of me that I am able to stay this long. The whole family is just very proud and happy for me. They are very proud of what I did right now, and they are also very excited. My future, what's going to happen, is I wish one day I can bring them over here to live with me. Then they can go to the show and watch me compete. I hope that they will come soon. In some unfortunate news, pro wrestling star Jimmy Rave passed away recently. As Bill Burns shared this on Twitter, writing, James Michael Guffey has died at the age of 39. James was best known as professional wrestler Jimmy Rave. His career, which started in 1999, continued for over 2 decades. He was a 2-time NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. He appeared in Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, where he teamed with Lance Hoyt, Rock as the Rock and Rave Infection. Outside of wrestling, he held the position of director of the Bartow County, Georgia Pierce Support Wellness and Respite Center for several years. James had been struggling with drug addiction for many years. His struggles resulted in the amputation of his arm and later both of his legs. James is survived by his ex-wife Felicia, daughter Kyla, and parents Jim and Tony. At the time of his death, he was living in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area with Gabby Gilbert. Rest in peace. Since making his return to pro wrestling and debuting for AEW, CM Punk has been appearing and wrestling on the shows frequently. Still, many have been critical of Punk facing low-profile opponents, as Disco Inferno had this to say on Keeping It 100. Punk's matches are fine. They all make sense based on the story they're telling us, but it is really flat. This is the biggest mistake the company has made. If you actually think that promoting CM Punk versus Lee Moriarty is going to get people interested in watching that segment, I just disagree with you. And I think the numbers show that nobody really cares about watching CM Punk fighting Lee Moriarty. When he does fight more credible opponents, you will see more people watching because fans are more involved in better things. Now Punk is in the middle of a feud with MJF, as it'll be interesting to see where this program goes. When it comes to the topic of who will replace Vince McMahon, many see Stephanie McMahon and Triple H stepping up for that role in the future. Speaking of the McMahon family, former WWE referee Mike Chioda was asked about the relationship between the family members. When asked if anyone told Triple H that dating Vince McMahon's daughter was a bad idea, he revealed that Shane was the one to do so. Yes, Shane did advise Triple H against dating Stephanie. Shane McMahon did. That's why the feud fell out. That's for sure. It was a thing from Vince Sr. that came around many years ago. They didn't want anybody dating talent. None of the kids and none of their family. He didn't want them taking bumps, which that didn't happen. I think Shane really had a big part of that, and that's why Shane and Triple H had a falling out for many years, and that's why Shane was exiled for 10 years. Shane is still not on the top of the list. Where is he at now? Is he in the office? Is he running things? Is he vice president? Is he vice CEO? Can somebody tell me where he's at right now, because he should be there? I mean, even with Triple H out, you're going to have John Laurinaitis, Road Dogg, and Scott Armstrong running the business. You're not going to have Shane McMahon there. Where is he at? It's boggled me for many years too. A lot of heat there. It gets more interesting, believe me. It's sad because when I started working for this company, there was Linda McMahon, Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, and Stephanie McMahon, and now it seems to be all broken apart. All the money in the world probably can't fix it. They have all the money in the world, a publicly traded company, which is okay. The family is torn apart at this point, I think. Maybe not torn apart all the way, which I hope not, but it's torn apart. With him still recovering from his heart procedure, it was recently reported that Triple H is likely never going to wrestle again. The formation of AEW has led to a recharging of the pro wrestling industry, as WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley told Wrestling Inc. that AEW puts pressure on WWE to do the right thing. I saw some financial figures as to what it was worth when Tony began his venture and what it's worth now, so it has been a remarkably successful company, but I think it's just part of a broader movement where people just want to see wrestling. I could be wrong, because maybe during the height of the territories, there was a better time to be a wrestler, but it's a really good time to be a wrestler. I think I put a Facebook post out that I always resented the term that Bill Watts used when he talked about it being a buyer's market. I thought it sounded cold and calculated and made wrestlers sound like soybean futures instead of human beings. But if it was a buyer's market in '93, I believe it's a seller's market. Anything that's good for the men and women, I used to say collectively, anything that's good for the boys. But I think we have to specify the men and women, because the women are such a huge part of our business now. The better that is for everybody. I think it's good for WWE when they meet with talent and the talent decides to go elsewhere, because it puts pressure on them to do the right thing. Following his release from WWE, Jeff Hardy has now commented on the situation, as a user on Twitter noted. Jeff Hardy said on Matt's Twitch stream that he would love to do an Ultimate Deletion tag match with Matt Hardy one day. For those unaware, Jeff was taking part in a live event tag team match where he appeared to look sluggish in the ring before tagging out and leaving through the crowd with security, which led to his release. Matt Hardy previously noted that his brother is doing fine and has even hinted at the two reuniting in AEW. Also, there has been a rumor floating around about Jeff wanting to be released, as Fightful reported. It seems silly to address this at all, but according to those close with him I spoke to, Jeff Hardy wasn't trying to get fired from WWE. He wasn't working to get out of his deal. The exact phrase I was given was that it was an absurd take. Matt Hardy would add during his Twitch stream, saying, "Before anyone rushes to judgment, obviously WWE drug tested him after all this stuff. Wait until you hear the results of that, and when that comes back clean, then hopefully people will feel better about it." Another report previously noted that Jeff Hardy appeared to be acting normal prior to the match and seems sober, as we hope everything is going well for him. Many have noted the creative freedom that is present in AEW, as Tony Khan went on the Wrestling Perspective to talk about how his stars have more legroom creatively than those in other companies. I think we found a really good balance. I have a lot of trust in them and they have a lot of trust in me. What it entails is I put together formats, matches, and stories, and where their ideas are going to go. Stories are going to go, who's going to wrestle who, and one really important element of this is how much time they're going to get. Also, I have to be very concerned about commercial breaks and where they go. show. In terms of who goes when, who gets to wrestle who, and when it happens, there's a lot to that. But in terms of what you're going to wear, what your presentation is going to be, what you're going to say exactly, that's on talent. Sure, you need to say I'm wrestling person X at this venue next week on this show, this night on TNT, or I'm wrestling person ABC at Full Gear on Saturday on pay-per-view. There are important things, and as long as you get those things across and do it in a way that makes sense, I'm okay not handing somebody a paper script and telling them you're going to say this, this, and this in this order, and every word of it, you can't change a word of it. That doesn't make any sense to me, and it would come across very fake, which is why I think the promos in AEW are very authentic and it feels very real. At an independent wrestling event, YouTuber and wrestler Hannibal attacked a referee, Lance Del Toro. While Hannibal claims it was a part of the show, many of those there claim otherwise. Del Toro's head would end up gouged with a spike, as it was further noted by Fightful. For those asking about why charges weren't pressed, we're told that's still a possibility. In asking those who worked the show, we're told that Nicholson, Hannibal, had personally reached out to Del Toro to set up the spot. A wrestler that worked on the show, Clayton Bloodstone, gave details on what transpired. They planned a blade spot, but Hannibal took it much further. I guess the ref's blade wasn't working, and Hannibal began stabbing him in the head multiple times. The ref went immediately to the hospital. We all thought he was going to die. Many of the guys in the back were very visibly shaken from it. Hannibal gave zero fucks. He acted like it wasn't a big deal. He was in his RV pretty much the whole time before his match. The ref that refed his match believed he was intoxicated and warned Carlito, who was working Hannibal, to be careful and end the match ASAP. On his podcast, Ric Flair was asked for his thoughts on the in-ring work of Bryan Danielson, as the Nature Boy went into detail on this. I didn't say he wasn't a good worker. When Hunter put him over at WrestleMania 30, that made him. He's a very talented kid, don't misunderstand me, but you have to have one match, one place, one day, somewhere that makes you who you are. Hunter, who only wrestles once in a while, came out and the match started off slow, but they ended up having a world-class match. He's a hell of a performer. I don't see him as being Kenny Omega. As a babyface, he's not Ricky Steamboat. As a heel, he's not me. If that pisses people off, they have to live with history. They tore the joint down. That is the night that made Bryan. I like him a lot personally. He's got a style. He's not AJ Styles by any means. He's a little bit smaller than AJ. He's not AJ Styles. I like his conditioning. He works hard. He'll do anything and sacrifice his body at all odds. He'll throw himself around and take incredible bumps. He's a hell of a hand. You're asking me who is good and who is great. He's very good. As a babyface, it's more believable. He can sell his butt off, so when he's making a comeback, it's more fun to watch him make a comeback against bigger guys. It's harder for me to believe he's going to hold someone down. As a babyface, who is just average size but loaded with talent, I much prefer to see him fighting from underneath. Now, Danielson is set to face off against the AEW World Champion Hangman Page for tonight's Dynamite Winter is Coming special. With MJF previously stating he'll go to whatever company offers him the most money when his AEW contract is up in 2024, it seems there might already be interest coming from WWE. F4W Online would report that not only WWE, but their TV partners in Fox and USA want MJF. An individual at one of those networks, who has been a very reliable source, told me I actually stopped what I was doing and listened to him. I don't think I've done that with pro wrestling in a long time. He has everything we would want. It really depends on if he could be that same person on WWE TV. We want new stars to be the focus within the next few years. That's the plan. Given his high-profile feud with CM Punk, it seems WWE is taking a look at MJF and could try their hardest when the time comes to sign him. Following his in-ring debut for AEW Rampage, the son of Taz, Hook has been receiving a ton of praise from fans. Many see him as a future star and champion, as his shirt on AEW's online store is now the best-selling item, even beating out CM Punk's shirt. EC3 made it known at Ring of Honor Final Battle that he was forming a stable that intends to disrupt the gatekeepers of the wrestling industry. With him already having Braun Strowman as a part of this group, it seems another former WWE star has joined. Former NXT champion Killer Kross has put out a post and graphic indicating he has joined the group, with him noting, "It is through this awakening I have seen the gatekeepers of this industry are nothing when they face of men of action. There is no defense for those with free will, those who hear the cheers of their ancestors, those who feel the beat of their wild hearts. Control your narrative." With EC3 already having promoted 2 events under this name, it remains to be seen what is next for this group. On his podcast, Ric Flair was asked why nobody has copied his trademark turnbuckle flip, as the Nature Boy noted that Vince McMahon doesn't want Charlotte to copy his moves. While some of the wrestlers can do my moves, I don't think Vince liked it when Ashley does it, because it reminds him of me. I have no idea who has stolen my moves. It's funny. You can learn every day, every match you were in, if it's somebody you're watching, which I think is very important if you're young in the business or even if you're in the same card as someone that's good. But I don't see a lot of guys copying my stuff. Last week on SmackDown, Charlotte was disqualified during her match against Toni Storm, as it'll be interesting to see where this feud goes from here. On AEW Dynamite, the war of words between MJF and CM Punk continued as the Salt of the Earth grabbed a microphone to say this to Punk. "I didn't realize that having an undefeated streak and a string of underwhelming matches against underwhelming opponents made you championship material. I thought that just made you the new Ryback." With Punk previously accusing Ryback of being unsafe in the ring, this got a huge reaction from the live crowd as well as fans online. This prompted Ryback to issue a response, telling MJF, "Thanks to the shout out, now you have your big chance at being an enhancement talent working with an underwhelming opponent." With his unexpected release from WWE, Jeff Hardy has announced that he is on tour to perform some original music. On his podcast, Jim Ross said he would love to see Jeff in AEW. Hope someday Hardy is wrestling for AEW. It is a no-brainer. Can you imagine the Young Bucks and the Hardy Boys and the Lucha Bros, the Hardys and FTR, the Battle of North Carolina? I'm all for this. And that's a year's worth of matches right there. Easy. With the contracts for Kyle O'Reilly and Johnny Gargano expiring recently, many are wondering where they will end up. While WWE reportedly expects one of these two to stay with the company, Kyle O'Reilly dropped an AEW tease on Twitter. With AEW posting a segment featuring Adam Cole, the Bucks, and Bobby Fish with a present, O'Reilly would reply asking what's in the box. MJF has had his bodyguard Wardlow by his side for the longest time in AEW, yet it seems this partnership could be meeting an end. Wardlow spoke on Busted Open Radio about his future, saying, "As we end this year, you have been seeing me a little more, and I think we are going to continue seeing more of me. And that's why I say 22, I think we have a lot more to come. MJF and I, we strictly have a business relationship. And that's all it's ever been, and that's all it will ever be. However, that contract isn't forever. The way he treats people, we will see what the future holds with that." With MJF mistreating Wardlow on most episodes of Dynamite, fans will be in for an implosion when this alliance comes down. With Ring of Honor closing up shop, many wrestling stars are now free agents, and according to BodySlam.net, AEW's picked up a former ROH standout. I spoke with multiple sources and have confirmed that Brody King is signed with All Elite Wrestling. When I asked about King's signing, one source told me that he was told on Thanksgiving weekend it was a done deal, and that he believed the signing happened almost immediately following the ROH news. With Malachi Black teasing a new member of his faction, many have already assumed it was Brody King, given they reunited at a PWG show and became tag champions. With Bray Wyatt out of WWE and many wondering where he'll end up, Dave Meltzer revealed in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that he is in no rush to get back in the ring. Wyndham, the former Bray Wyatt, is another name that has been talked about. Last we heard was that he had the movie gig and didn't want to come back so soon. Whether he comes back here or Impact, I don't know at this point. He may not be in a rush to do anything given he had one of the top 5 or 6 contracts in WWE, so unless he was living incredibly large, he should not have financial financial issues forcing him back until he feels like it. At one point, he was apart on money from both promotions. November of last year, Zelina Vega would find herself being let go by WWE due to her streaming on Twitch. The company had put in place a ban on their talent using third-party platforms, as Vega had to give up a ton of money to get re-signed. Meltzer gave a rundown of the numbers, reporting that there was a leaked data breach at Twitch, which showed company payouts over the 2-year period from September 2019 to September 2021 to pro wrestling personalities. Basically, there is money in this, but if you aren't Paige Zelina Vega, who no longer can do it, or Adam Cole, it's not big money. Over the 2 years, Paige was paid $478,000, Vega was paid $341,000 but is no longer allowed to do it, Cole was paid $318,000. Others listed were Impact Wrestling at $69,000, Tyler Breeze at $43,000, Eva Luna at $35,000, Colt Cabana at $32,000, and Xavier Woods, who also is no longer allowed to do it, at $25,000. Following her main event match on Raw against Becky Lynch, where Liv Morgan came close to winning the women's title, Liv has now revealed to ProZben Max that she was not originally in the main event of Raw. Not until that day did Becky Lynch and I were made aware that we were main eventing Raw. Throughout the week I was hoping so much that we would get to main event, because I really want to pay homage, but also so that we could do our thing, and I was just hoping it would be the main event. Then I discovered a couple hours into the day that we were going to be the main event, because originally we were not. We were not going to be the main event. It got switched, and so it was just so special. Following his WWE contract expiring, former NXT champion Johnny Gargano could be getting ready for a run outside the company, possibly debuting for AEW. On his Twitch stream, Gargano spoke about the match between Hangman Page and Danielson on Dynamite, saying he'd love to get his hands on the American Dragon once more. I did watch the match, it was fantastic. They're both amazingly talented. I wrestled Bryan twice on the indies, both times for AIW in Cleveland. I've said time and time again that he's the best wrestler in the world. I know I say a lot of people are one of the wrestlers in the world. I truly believe Bryan is the best wrestler in the world. For my personal opinion, just because I have been in the ring with him, so I kind of know from experience, but I don't know how to explain it or say why he's the best. You just gotta be in there with him and you just know Bryan is the best. It's a shame that we never got a chance to. We haven't tangled in the last couple of years, but hopefully at some point down the line that can happen. With Kevin Owens recently re-signing with WWE, new details have come out regarding his contract, such as salary and how that pay can be used against him. It's in line with what I heard. Someone in his position who can come in and out of the main events, upper mid-card, will make that level at this time, but he won't get the 90-day clause waived. He wasn't going to get more money. The $2 to $3 million a year range is so blinding to people. They sign not realizing it's a 90-day contract that renews every day at WWE's sole discretion. It's how they got Wyndham Rotunda. He was going to get $3 million 3-year term. They went to a 5-year term. He held. They inched up towards 4. He jumped at it, but it's still a 90-day contract, and with the higher number, it takes less and less to trigger the release. Speaking of Kevin Owens re-signing with WWE, it seems his good pal Sami Zayn might have done the same, as it was noted in The Observer that there has also been locker room talk that Sami Zayn did re-sign with WWE as well, but WWE sources have not confirmed Zayn having signed to us yet. While she is in a well-received feud with Naomi on SmackDown, there were apparently plans for Sonya Deville to be a part of Money in the Bank, as Fightful noted. During the revolving door that was the SmackDown roster around Money in the Bank in July, we can confirm that WWE actually had graphics made featuring Deville as a Money in the Bank competitor. Of course, that didn't end up happening. For AEW Rampage, the son of ECW legend Taz, Hook, made his long-awaited in-ring debut as he defeated Fuego del Sol. While many fans were excited for this match, a critic of AEW even found this debut impressive, as Jim Cornette had this to say about it on his podcast. "I am not necessarily saying this was the greatest debut in pro wrestling history or as good as Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 34, which had a lot more high-priced talent involved and had a lot more rehearsal. However, I said on the show a few months ago, you never get to see anybody anymore that when you first see them you're like, oh wow, like you would before everything was put on the internet. You could always find a wrestler who can surprise you, but in this case, they managed to do it because if anything, from the way he was just hanging around a couple of months ago, he got physical and threw a few kicks, but it didn't do much for him. You lowered expectations for him. All of a sudden, he is better than expected, and people are getting into it, so it was a combination of a really good debut, and he's got a lot of talent and has a lot of oomph to him, to his personality, and people were just surprised because it was better than they thought it was going to be. I really enjoyed it. Hook already has another opponent set up for him, as Tony Khan wrote. Thanks to Taz and Hook, this Christmas AEW Rampage, I'm giving the world the gift of Hook. It will be a much bigger test. Hook versus Bear Bronson on Saturday night, December 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern, as part of a huge Christmas night Rampage at a special night and time. Deonna Purrazzo had worked on NXT from 2018 up until her release from WWE last year. She would end up in Impact Wrestling afterwards, where she'd have 2 reigns as Knockout Champion. Speaking on the Two-Man Power Trip of Wrestling podcast, she recalled her time in WWE, saying, I was definitely labeled as a problem. I was definitely labeled as someone who has a loud mouth, but for a long time I wanted to check every box. I pitched losing and making that a thing until I snap, you know what I mean? I pitched I don't even need to win the match. Let me just keep the armbar and get disqualified, and that can set up a feud with this babyface, and I would do extra promos and film stuff at home. I really can say at the end of the day I put every bit of me into that place to make it work, and it didn't, because when I feel taken advantage of or I feel like I'm not wanted, then I have an opinion about it, and I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to advocate for myself, and I don't necessarily think at the time that was what they wanted out of talent. At the Hard to Kill event, Purrazzo will be facing Mickie James in a rematch over the Knockouts title. While Bret Hart is seen as an all-time great in pro wrestling, it may surprise you to know that he was embarrassed about entering the business, as he told the Calgary Sun. When I got into wrestling, I never had any idea that I would be in this kind of a situation where people were celebrating my impact as a pro wrestler. When I got into wrestling, it was considered just a step up above topless dancing. I remember being kind of embarrassed in those days. I remember I'd been wrestling for my dad for about 3 weeks. I met a girl I knew at a shopping mall. She asked, "So what are you doing these days?" I said, "Well, I'm working for my dad nowadays. I'm a wrestler." I remember she looked at me and said, "I'm so disappointed. You had so much more potential to be something much bigger than that. I'm a pro wrestler now, whether you like it or not." Back when CM Punk made his return to pro wrestling and debut for AEW, Roman Reigns called him out on BT Sports, saying he is not really a needle mover. When it comes down to it, CM Punk was not as good or over as John Cena. He wasn't as good or as over and moved the needle like The Rock. It was what it was. From a full-time performer, I understand the frustration of wanting more, but like I said before, you gotta take it. I'm a full-time performer, but I've done everything that needs to be done to stay in this position, to be in this position, to continue to make the opportunity for myself, to be the main event of SummerSlam against John Cena. Now, the Needle Mover Roman Reigns shirt is available on WWEshop.com. With Ring of Honor temporarily closing up shop to reinvent themselves, the company would release all their wrestling talent. This has led to some fans thinking the company will shut down for good, as ROH COO Joe Koff touched on this rumor, saying this on the ROH Strong podcast. What seeped into the narrative is that we were shutting down, when all we announced is that we were not doing any live events in the first quarter. We never used the words shutting down. With the Day 1 pay-per-view coming up, SmackDown is set to see a gauntlet match to determine the number 1 contender to the IC title. Now, this episode was already taped, so if you don't want anything spoiled, go ahead and skip forward. The 12 Days of Christmas gauntlet saw Sami Zayn in the end eliminate Ricochet to win, as he will be facing Nakamura for the IC title at Day 1. Also on SmackDown, Charlotte Flair successfully defended her women's title against Toni Storm, while Drew McIntyre and the New Day beat the Usos and Madcap Moss in a Christmas Eve street fight. On NXT, Cora Jade is making a name for herself as she is in a feud with the women's champion Mandy Rose. Since Cora can be seen coming to the ring on a skateboard, this prompted AEW star Darby Allin to comment on Jade's character, as he took to Twitter to write, "Skating is a huge part of my life, not a fake character for TV." Jade would reply, bringing up Allin being accused during the Speaking Out movement. "Being a good person with no abuse allegations against me is a huge part of my life, and not just a character I play on TV." Both these posts have since been deleted, but not before many took notice. With reactions to this, one user wrote, "Oh cool, Darby Allin is trending. Something cool must have happened and Winter is coming. Nope, it's just him getting bodied by a 20-year-old NXT star." Another fan wrote, "I stopped paying attention for like 20 minutes and Darby Allin is getting hatred left and right while Cora Jade is a hero. What on earth happened?" After having success in a tag team on NXT, Shane Thorne would find himself on Raw with the Retribution stable. He was taken off TV and recently released last month, as he's now taken to Twitter to post a video revealing he is retired from sports entertainment and is returning to pro wrestling. With AEW continuing to be a force in pro wrestling on cable, Tony Khan has taken to Twitter to call out Fox News for not being able to keep up with his promotion and ratings. "Hey Fox News, it's amusing hearing you opining about AEW ratings considering Dynamite on Wednesday has beaten every single Fox News show for 6 straight weeks." On SmackDown, Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss hosted Happy Talk as they tried to remove Drew McIntyre's sword from Adam Pearce's desk that they stole last week. McIntyre would eventually run them off before getting his sword back. Dutch Mantel spoke about this segment with Sportskeeda. "That's the worst in-ring segment I've ever seen. These jokes bombed. I didn't even know what he was talking about. It was just a bad in-ring segment. Even McIntyre coming out at the end couldn't save it. It is what it is, and it sucked. The top of the hour is where you don't want to lose them, because that's when they are switching. But I think when they saw Madcap and Corbin come out, they switched before the top of the hour." Since WWE has been releasing many of their wrestling talent and backstage staff for the past couple of years, it makes sense that tensions have risen backstage in the company. But the same could be said for AEW now. Recently, AEW President Tony Khan came under fire after Urban Meyer was fired from his role as head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars on the 16th. Given the Jaguars are partly owned by Tony Khan, he has come under fire. ESPN reported that the Jaguars plan to withhold the remaining guarantees on Meyer's contract, with him having 4 years left on his deal. This comes over a month after Khan criticized WWE over their previous round of releases, with him saying WWE only gives out temporary contracts these days. Andrew Zarian would note that both WWE and AEW are experiencing issues behind the scenes. There seems to be a divide happening between talent in both companies. Spoke to multiple sources yesterday and they feel like many would not go to the other side if there was an opportunity, either your team WWE or team AEW for many. Following the release of Jeff Hardy, it was reported that WWE had offered him a chance to go to rehab, which he would decline. On his podcast, Ric Flair would give his take on this situation, saying, "Well, you know how I feel. I couldn't agree more. I love Jeff, I love his wife Beth, and above all else, they got a great relationship. You know, I've been there and done that. I went there one time and they told me like to go back again. I said no." Back in July, Bray Wyatt would end up being released from WWE to the shock of many fans. Talking about the reason behind him being cut, Dave Meltzer noted on Wrestling Observer Radio, Bray Wyatt is a completely different situation. Wyatt scared a lot of people, because if someone like Wyatt gets fired, then only guys like Roman Reigns, Randy Orton, and Brock Lesnar are safe. I think that's not really the case when you are at that level. The only reason someone would want to cut someone like that would be if they wanted out and made a lot of noise about it. AEW star Sammy Guevara recently announced that he and his fiancée are no longer together. This comes as a shock since the two got engaged on an episode of Dynamite not long ago. Following this news, many fans were under the impression that Sammy was leaving his fiancée for Ty Conti, as the two have been rumored to be together. Due to this, Sammy and Ty would end up trending on Twitter, which would lead to Conti deactivating her account. The Public Enemies podcast wrote Ty Conti got bullied off of Twitter because Sammy Guevara broke up with his fiancée, and they think it's her fault. I hate wrestling fans, America. One fan wrote Ty Conti deactivating her account is another example that if these people were given pitchforks, they'd happily run people out of town based on gossip. Social media has given absolute nutcases a platform to play bully with no consequence. Drew McIntyre looks set to take on Madcap Moss at Day 1. Dave Meltzer gave an update on potential plans for his booking, with him saying it's probably just to give Drew a win since obviously Roman and Drew are going to get together. I'm surprised, but it makes sense. McIntyre made it known that he is looking to continue picking up victories en route to facing the Universal Champion, which will be interesting to see when the time comes. In the age of the internet, pro wrestling suffers from many angles and storylines getting spoiled, but when it comes to Roman Reigns firing Paul Heyman on SmackDown, WWE did their best to keep this a secret, with Ringside News reporting that Roman turning on Heyman this week didn't happen all at once. The writing team was told the closing segment was set to include some big shifts, but no other information was given to them. Also, Heyman turning Brock into beast mode in LA was meant to be a turning point.